Hello and welcome back here in the auditorium on X-Dream events. This session is all about transcoding, file transcoding in particular. Tomorrow we will talk about live transcoding. With me today here is David from our partner Capella Systems. Hello, David.
Hello, Stefan. It's great to be here with you and X-Dream today.
Thank you so much for joining us. So before we jump into the demo, I would like to give a short introduction about who we have here at the table with us. Capella Systems, our partner for transcoding, as said, based in California, in the middle of the Silicon Valley. Good friends of mine since a very, very long time and ex-colleagues. And happy to promote. The product portfolio that we are looking on today is composed from two halves. One is the live transcoder, as said, we will look in this tomorrow, and the other one is the file transcoder. The file transcoder is on one hand a standalone machine, what is called FTC, and on the other hand it can be a farm of transcoders where we have one machine managing the others. The farm manager is called Cambria cluster and the farm nodes again called FTC, Cambria FTC. The live transcoders that we will see then tomorrow are called Cambria Live and Cambria Broadcast Manager, but that's a topic for tomorrow. So, David, let's jump into the demonstration, and as the very first, it would be great if you can show us a quick run through about how a transcoding job is created in FTC when we look onto the manual transcoding application, because I think that gives us the best impression about all the features that it has. And then we will look later on into the farming and into the automation.
Sure. So what you should be seeing here on screen is the Cambria FTC main UI. And right now you'll see kind of three tabs on top. One is sources, the next one over is encoding, and the last one is conversion. And so from the sources tab, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a source in here so we can see a source loaded into our application. I'll grab a source, and once loaded, you'll see that we'll show basic properties of the source on screen. And then there are these button functions here to the right. And these button functions allow you to do certain types of things. So if we wanted to grab a segment, we could use the segment editor here. If we wanted to add filters to the source, such as cropping or adding a logo filter or adding captioning, we could go ahead and use the source filters to do that. The next tab over is our audio mapper, and here's if you want to change or mix channels together or remap the audio, you would use this particular function. And then I'm going to jump to the encoding tab, and what I'm going to do is going to load the target that we want to output to. And when I load from the encoding tab, when I open up the preset editor, you have the option to kind of choose your container and your video codec that you want to encode out to. And so I'm going to choose MP4, and you could choose whatever codec you would like. And right now I'm set to X264, and you'll see that we have kind of a number of encoding settings down below if you just kind of scroll down on this tab. I'm going to leave everything default for now. And when I click on OK, it's going to go ahead and apply the encoding preset to the list there. And if I'm just trying to do a simple encode to see what my output looks like, I could go ahead and hit the convert button here. And when I do that, it'll jump straight to the conversion tab, and you're going to see that simple job kind of run.
Thank you very much, David. So as this job is just running right now, let's look into some of the features a little bit more in deep that you have just already mentioned. Could you show us, for instance, the trimming function?
Sure. So what I'll do is I'll jump back to the source tab, and then I'll go into the segment editor here. And from the segment editor, if I wanted to trim this video, I could use the scrubbing bar down below here. Or if I wanted to directly type in and out points, I could do that. I could also, if the source file has timecode, I could actually also search the source by timecode and add the in and out points in that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim a little bit here. I'm going to trim out this part of the video. I'm going to set an in point here. I'm going to set an out point a little bit later. Now I'm just going to add that segment here to the segment properties, and that applies the segment that I'd like to grab. And I'm going to click on OK. And once we do that, if we look at the source tab again, you'll see that there's the segment editor kind of icon is highlighted in orange, and that kind of shows that there's a segment that you want to go ahead and cut. And then would you also like me to add a video filter here?
Yeah, earlier you spoke about various video filters. Let's take just one example, for instance, the logo filter that more or less everyone needs, and probably we can then also see some others a little bit later. But could you show us how to add a logo, please?
Sure. So on the filters list, you would just go ahead and choose the logo filter here. And the logo filter allows you to basically browse your system for a logo file. And what I'll do is I'll just grab an image from my directory here. And with the logo file, you're allowed to kind of choose different scales. And right now I have a logo filter applied, so I'm going to set it to 100% so it's kind of full size because I have a full 1080p kind of logo. And you'll see it show up here. If I wanted to, I could go ahead and add a transparency to it. You could adjust the position of the logo if you'd like. And once you're happy with how it looks, you're going to go ahead and click the OK button and OK again. And again, from the source screen, it's highlighted in orange that shows you have a filter applied. And in this case, a logo filter.
I know. And
then so if we wanted to... Yep, go ahead.
So I know that FTC supports some very sophisticated filters that are not that usual for a transcoder software. So probably you would like to highlight some of them as well.
Sure. So I'm going to go ahead and walk down the filter list so you can see the filters that we have. So we have a number of filters. We have color correction. We could actually go through and look for color bars and remove them. We could also look for black segments and also remove those as well. If you're trying to do color space conversion, we have a number of color space conversion options, as well as the ability for you to use your own LUT tables. We could go ahead and burn in subtitles. We have a plugin for easy titles. So if you have your own caption file, you'd like to go ahead and embed the captions into the target file, you could use the easy titles filter to do that. We have a properties changer filter. So if there's something wrong with your source and you would like to basically override the aspect ratio or the frame mode, you could do that through this particular filter. And we also have a number of audio filters too. So something like audio normalization, normalizing to ITU 1770-3, for example, is something that can be done through this particular filter.
An impressive long list. As we just spoke about audio earlier, you spoke about the audio mapping, the track mapper. I think that's also something special in FTC. Can you please explain a little bit? I assume it's also very important for multi-language scenarios where we deal with many audio tracks.
Sure. So what I'll do, I'll load in a different file here, one with lots of audio tracks, so you can see me manipulate the audio on the source. So I'm going to load in a file, an MXF file that has basically 8 tracks of audio. Each track has 1 channel each. So in a file like this, it's really common to have a couple of the tracks kind of represent your stereo audio, and maybe the other tracks are meant to be 6-channel audio. So a user might want to take a source file like this, and when they output the output file, they might want to go to 2 tracks of audio, the first one being stereo, the second one being, let's say, Dolby audio. And I'm going to show you really quickly how something like that could be configured in our application. So again, the source file has 8 tracks, all single channel audio. And what we're going to do is we're just going to reconfigure the source so that it has 2 tracks of audio. So I'm going to add the first one, the first track. And the first track, like I said, commonly it would be stereo. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify that this track has 2 channels of audio, and I'm going to choose track 1 and track 2 to be the stereo configuration. I'm going to click on OK, and you'll see down below here in the mapped audio tracks section that I'm now remapping this to 1 track, 2 channels. And then for the second track, what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify that I'd like to have 6 audio channels in it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify that the first track is going to be the original track 3. And so the first channel comes from track 3 of the original source, and then all the way to track 8. And I'm going to click on OK. And you'll see that now I have basically reconfigured the source to have 2 tracks of audio, the first one with 2 channels and the second one with 6 channels. And now all you need to do on the target side is to make sure that you have it mapped to the target tracks correctly. And so I'm going to just go ahead and jump there just to show you how that's done. Going to my source, and I'm going to specify this source now will have 2 tracks of audio. And the first one, let's say, will be AAC audio. And the source track it's going to grab from is track 1. That's the one we remapped to have 2 channels of audio. And then the second one, what I'll do is I'm going to specify that we want Dolby audio here. And then we'll grab that from source track 2. And there you have the configuration there. And if you'd like to kind of scroll down on our target side, there's even more kind of audio configuration options down below. So let's say if I wanted to configure the Dolby audio to have some different kind of Dolby parameters, I could do that down here at the bottom.
Very cool. So that very moment we spoke about mainly manual setup, manual operations, but now let's move on a little bit and let's talk about the farming and the automation. Could you show us how, for instance, we can queue a job from that desktop application towards the farm software?
Sure. So I have this job set up, and if I wanted to just convert through the UI, you saw me before just hit the convert button. Instead of hitting the convert button, the button right above says queue all jobs. And what that does is it will queue this particular job to our background service, which will then go ahead and run that job. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that now. And then I'm going to go ahead and pop up the manager so you could actually see that manager with that job running here. And so, like I said, it kind of queues this job to kind of our background service. And that particular service is the one that actually handles, watch folder automation. And also if you're submitting jobs via the API, it's going to go ahead and basically queue it to the background there. And you'll see that job show up here on this particular list.
Before we look into the actual configuration of the transcoding farm, let's start with how an operator can make use of it. How would he monitor jobs and manage jobs at the farm manager?
Okay, so so this particular jobs list is where any job that you queue will go ahead and show up on this list. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and queue this original job a few more times so you could actually see that job running in the background there. I'll just queue it several times here. And okay, so we at least have 2 more of these jobs running in the background. So you'll see that the jobs are running. And if you have a whole list of jobs and jobs that are queued, one thing that you could do is you could actually right click on jobs that haven't run yet, that are kind of waiting to be run in the queue, and you can kind of reset the priorities of those jobs. So if you have a set of jobs that need to run before other jobs, you could kind of highlight groups of jobs if you wanted to, and then specify what priority level you'd like to set those jobs at. And this could be done after you've submitted the job, but a lot of people will do it before they submit the job. So when you're submitting a job, you could go ahead and set the job priority. Or if you build a watch folder with us, you could go ahead and specify, certain watch folders might have a higher priority. And so those jobs will run first before the jobs from other watch folders will run. So it's really kind of an easy way to manage the jobs. And when you have a list full of jobs, you could actually go to the dashboard that we have here and see, which machines are running the jobs, whether or not certain machines are having problems over other machines that you have running these jobs. You could actually look at how many jobs ran within the last 4 hours versus 24 hours versus 72 hours, and kind of look at the overall health of your encoding machine or encoding farm.
I've just spotted this option, urgent priority. What does it mean? Sounds interesting.
Oh, urgent priority. So imagine I have a list full of jobs running, and when you specify the urgent priority here, what you're doing is you are asking this job to run not only first, but we will basically pause any other jobs that are running in the background so that all the resources of the machine will be dedicated to this particular job that's been deemed as urgent. And that way you can get this encoding job done first, even if all the transcoding slots are taken on this machine or across your cluster.
So I've several times mentioned already that we are talking here about a transcoding farm. Now let's look onto how the farm administration and configuration happens and how a farm is managed. Can you please explain how that is done with cluster?
Sure. So right here through the Cambria Cluster Manager interface, where we were looking at the jobs that are being submitted to it, if a few tabs down is a machines tab. So that's where I'm going to start first. So we're in a network full of machines with Cambria FTC as the encoding nodes.
Wow.
This particular machine itself can do transcoding. And right now you'll see on the left-hand side, it's the only machine connected to my farm, my cluster. But I could actually choose another machine here and go ahead and connect that machine to the cluster as well. And once I do that, it's going to go ahead and switch that to basically online and usable by the cluster. So now when I go ahead and submit jobs, this particular machine will distribute the jobs between the FTC machines that are actually connected online to this particular managing node. And you could actually just, from this particular tab, look at that particular machine, how much CPU is actually being used, how you could actually set the number of transcoding slots that can be used on that particular machine. So there are management functions that you could apply straight from this particular tab.
What does use dynamic slots mean?
So use dynamic slots. So so when you configure a FTC machine to be used by the cluster, I would say most people will go ahead and set up the number of simultaneous transcoding jobs that can run on that machine. We have a function called use dynamic slots that allows you to dynamically have our application kind of control the number of simultaneous jobs that are running. So for example, if I wanted this particular FTC machine here to use the dynamic slots feature, what I would do is I would set basically a maximum slot value. So I could set this a high number, let's say like 12. And then if I check the dynamic slots function, what will happen is when the cluster distributes the job to this particular FTC machine, it's going to go ahead and look at the CPU use of that machine. And if that CPU is using, let's say, less than 90% of the CPU for that machine, it's going to go ahead and continue to hand off jobs to that machine until that machine uses a greater than 90% CPU, then we'll stop dynamically handing off jobs to that particular machine. So it's a way to make sure that if you have different types of jobs running on your cluster, that use different CPU resources, and you also have potentially different FTC, different hardware running these FTC software, then it allows a smart way to kind of control utilizing all of the CPU on the machines without slowing down the jobs.
So now we spoke about transcoding jobs to be set up manually, then we spoke about the farm. I think now it's time to also elaborate a little bit on how we can automate things. So what if someone does not want to start jobs manually, but wants to use, for instance, a watch folder? Could you please show us a very, very simple and basic watch folder setup?
Sure. I have a watch folder tab here, and you'll see I have this one watch folder configured here. And so what that means is we are watching a a folder location or a network share location where somebody could actually drop in a video file and start a job. So I have, I will show you, here is the watchful location I've set up here. I'm just going to go into it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of grab a file that we have, and I'm going to drag and drop that file into the watch folder. And what you will see here is from the jobs tab, you'll actually see that particular job show up and start to run. And so that's basically what a watch folder does. Oh, sorry, I switched too quickly. There you go. You see the job show up, and now it's running in there. So we could go in and take a look at some of the configurations of a watch folder. And so again, I'm looking at a kind of a network share location. You can have many watch folders on your machine, and each watch folder, when you drop in a file, could encode to one file as an output, but you could actually set up the watch folder encode to multiple video output files. So you drop in your source, you would output to the video file outputs that you need, and it could be multiples. And so we have, from the watch folder, we have the capability to not only watch the watch folder location, but we can actually watch an FTP location or an additional network storage location. We could even watch an Amazon S3 storage location. So that's basically configured from this first tab here, this retrievals tab. And to kind of continue showing you some watch folder functions, the next tab over is source acceptance. So, when we watch a watch folder, we kind of will go ahead and pull it at certain intervals that's controllable by the user. So I think by default, it's set to 1 minute. So if you drop in a file, it might take a little bit of time for that job to show up. So you could actually set this and configure this setting to something quicker if you wanted to. We can watch the watch folder for a growing file. So in some workflow scenarios, somebody might be outputting or moving a file that takes a while to transfer or something like that into a watch folder. And for certain types of video files, we could actually start the transcoding process before that file is completely being written or moved to the watch folder location. And we could also kind of watch for a group of files for some more complicated workflows. So in some cases, people are moving in a video file, but not only that, they're moving in, let's say, a subtitle file or a file that they want to use for subtitling at the same time. So we could watch that watch folder to make sure both files come in. Then we could trigger a more complicated encoding action. Mm-hmm. The next tab over is the encoding tab. This is where you actually set up your job to be encoded. And if I click on the Add Encoding button, you'll see the preset editor come up. You could configure the target to the output that you'd like to go out to. From that target configuration screen, you could also do things like, after the job is encoded, you could have a post task upload. You could upload it to an FTP location. You could upload it to YouTube, Facebook, upload it to an S3 location if you wanted to. You could run a separate command line after the job is finished encoding. You could also notify. We have a notification setting in the preset editor where you can notify once the job is done. And then from the watch folder configuration, we also have the ability to do simple actions or complex actions. And both of these functions have the capability to do, to have additional type triggers. So for example, you might want your watch folder to only trigger a job if it's a certain file size, or you only want to run a encoding job if it's if it matches a certain criteria. So maybe here, you have people dropping in all types of video files, but maybe you only want to trigger the encoding action on MOV files. So you could specify that criteria here. And then not only can we do encoding actions, but there's a number of other types of actions we could do through a watch folder. So we could, for example, copy that source file to another folder. We could move it. we could delete that source, we could upload that source, we could run the command line. So you don't necessarily need to encode that file. So just go back to that example of a watch folder that everybody's dropping every type of file into, but maybe that folder is meant specifically for one type of file. So you could specify a move action for files that don't match your particular criteria or something like that. So, and then the next tab over here is a cleanup function. So here is where I could specify that when a watch folder is used and a file is used or used successfully, I could go ahead and clean up that particular source file and basically delete it from the watch folder after a certain interval. So this will allow for operators to continue using the watch folder without having to worry too much about the cleanup part of maintaining the watch folder. And so after jobs run successfully in our encoder, we will basically mark that particular source on that watch folder as something that has been successful. And then we could go ahead and delete it from the watch.
Thank you, David, for this quite complete run through the complete watch folder setup and automation possibilities. There might be way more to tell about the farm configuration, API usage, and so on. But I would like to move on to another topic, something very brand new that was released not that long time ago. That is the possibility to offload jobs to a public cloud. The solution is called Cloud Extend, and I think it's made for people that have an on-premise farm or data center hosted farm and want to spin up additional resources dynamically. Could you please show us how this Cloud Extend does work?
Sure. So from the Cluster Manager screen, you could actually click on the Cloud Extend tab. We have all of those functions there. And so this is new. We basically allow users to create their own AMIs. And once you've created your Amazon AMI with our software installed on it, our application could be used to launch those AMIs and also dynamically launch instances when you need them. So if you look here on screen, what I'll do is I'll clear my list here. You'll see on the left-hand side, there's a function called add AWS EC2 instance. So I have an AMI already created. It has Cambria FDC, the encoder, on there. And if I want to spin up an instance, all I need to do is click the add button. And what will occur is you'll see that on the right-hand side here, under the operation history, you'll see that an instance is added here. Mm-hmm. And what that does is we're instructing Amazon to go ahead and spin up a EC2 instance to be used by this particular controlling node. And so this takes a while because it takes a while for AWS machines to start up. But you'll see on the Machines tab now, you will see a AWS instance. You'll see this here. It's under cold standby now with an exclamation mark because it's not ready. But in a few minutes, it will become ready, and you could go ahead and add that machine to your cluster to be used to transcode jobs.
You said there is an API that I can trigger that I have prepared, but is there also an image available that you from Capella have prepared that I'm just calling?
Yes. Yes, for all of our releases, our official releases, we will also release a public AMI that if you just wanted to use quickly, you can.
Ah, perfect. So that's simple.
But we also have instructions. Yeah, that's really fast, especially if you're just trying it out for the first time. And then, of course, as you decide you want to go ahead and use it, we also provide instructions for you to create your own AMIs if you choose that route.
Good. So once this machine is created, it shows up in the farm as available. But what does it mean for the transcoding behavior?
So that just means that jobs can now be offloaded to that particular machine. So we, in operating in a cluster where it's transcoding, hundreds of jobs at a time, you might want to dynamically kind of create these instances that you will use as transcoding nodes. And so that's what the next setting down actually does, this setting where it says AWS settings, dynamic instance controller. This section basically runs a little script that allows us to input certain types of parameters so that we allow the user to basically control when their instances will actually be started automatically. So if you look down in the controller parameter field, you'll see kind of this first command says create a 10. It basically means if there are 10 or more jobs in the job queue that aren't running anywhere on any machines, that means they're just waiting for resources to be freed up. We can automatically launch a machine. And the next parameter over is limit 2. Basically means at the most, just spin up 2 machines. So this is all user configurable. They could go ahead and set these settings to whatever they want. And the next one over says, for each machine that spins up, configure it so that it runs 2 jobs at a time. So it has 2 transcoding slots. And we also have one which allows you to specify when you want to automatically no longer send jobs to the AWS machines. So when the job queue is at 0 in this particular instance, but you could set it to any number, you could say no longer send jobs to those AWS instances. And then if there are no jobs running on the AWS instances, you could actually use another function that we have that will automatically terminate those instances if they're not being used for any transcoding jobs.
I see. So this gives full control on the costs, also on the performance, and on the available feature. But how
Correct.
about the content? As it is on-premise that very moment, how can the machine from the cloud reach the content that is with me?
Yep. So there's a couple ways you could do that, and some users will basically access their Amazon S3 sources directly, and you could do that if you want to. But we also have a function down here that allows you to configure a local drive location or local network storage location to act like an S3 location to allow for your Amazon EC2 instances to grab those sources and use them as sources in these transcoding jobs. And this next function down below allows you to basically configure that. And so we make it really, really easy for users to basically access their sources and use the additional resources they just spun up through Amazon.
These are really cool new features. David, you gave us in the last half hour quite a comprehensive run through the complete software, all about file transcoding. As said earlier, there are many more features that we could look into. This might be a topic for follow-up sessions that we do, where we elaborate a little bit more on the details. Have many, many thanks joining us today here at Extreme Events and giving us these insights.
Great. Thank you very much, Stefan.
All the best, and thank you so much for everyone who was joining us today here at Extreme Events.